I wanted to fight him in the streets. Ripped to shreds and thrown in the trash when I came across them. I want to shake you. Oh my God. Well, hello. Welcome back to my channel. Jashana here to talk about some friggin' books that I have read recently. The first two are going to be very, very quick because they are poetry collections that I've randomly picked up. I used to read, like when I was younger, middle school, high school, a little bit in college, I read poetry all the time. I have many books of poetry from when I was a kid that I got like as gifts and things. I just really, really liked poetry, and I even would write poetry, and the elementary school, middle school, even some high school is quite embarrassing, and many have been ripped to shreds and thrown in the trash when I came across them. But then even in college, in one of my classes, one of my writing classes, one of my poems, a professor nominated for this like national award. I ended up not like winning, but it was like honorable mention, whatever. So yeah, I used to be more into poetry, and then I just fell off with it for some reason and haven't picked it up in forever. So I randomly saw on Instagram this one particular poem that I really liked from this poetry collection, I Lost Summer Somewhere, by Sarah Russell. So I picked this up, I bought a copy, obviously, and I read through it back in July, and it was cool. I liked it. The most notable poem, though, from the entire book was the one I had seen on social media. That was my favorite by far. The rest were, they were cool, they were fine. It just wasn't necessarily to my particular taste. My favorite poem, though, I'll read. If I had 3 lives, I'd marry you in 2. The other, perhaps that life over there, at Starbucks, sitting alone, writing. A memoir, maybe a novel or this poem. No kids, probably. A small apartment with a view of the river. And books, lots of books. And time to read. Friends to laugh with, and a man sometimes. For a weekend, to remember what skin feels like when it's alive. I'd be thinner in that life, vegan, practice yoga. I'd go to art films, farmers markets, drink martinis in swingy skirts and big jewelry. I'd vacation on the Maine coast and wear a flannel shirt weekend guy left behind, loving the smell of sweat and aftershave more than I did him. I'd walk the beach at sunrise, find perfect shell spirals, and study pockmarks water makes in sand. And I'd wonder sometimes if I'd ever find you. I love that. I love that so much. I love that so much. So, yeah, I didn't love this whole book overall. I gave it 3.25 stars because it was cool. It was like better than meh, but in the realm of meh, cool for me. The next one is also a poet, a writer that I found via Instagram, Celia Martinez. And the first collection here is Volume 1, Diary of a Romantica. Volume 1, Lovers Forgotten. And she has her Instagram, oh, and I cannot remember her handle. I think, is it Diary of a Romantica? No. She does a lot of Instagram reels where she's reading her poetry, and obviously like in the cadence that she wrote it, and she just is very good with like the spoken word, and hers are all just so sweet and touching and heartbreaking sometimes, but mostly heartwarming and just like hopeless romantic, or as she refers to herself sometimes as a hopeful romantic. And I think they're so sweet and just feel good most of the time. So I quite enjoyed this. Let me see if I can find like my favorite. They're very like rhymey and very lovey. I don't know what like my favorite. This is one, I mean, maybe this isn't my favorite, but it's shorter. I don't even know you, but I've felt you in my dreams. And something tells me that even now, as strangers, we're on each other's teams. People tell me I'm too much of a romantic, and honestly, that's probably true. But how could a person not be romantic when in the end, they end up with you? I might not know you now, but I know I'll see you later, and that because we worked on ourselves, our love will be even greater. Just so cute. Just so freaking cute. I love it. It just makes me feel all the feel-good, hopeless romantic things. I gave it 4 stars, so fun times. And then into the first book we're talking about today, full novel. And this was also back in July that I read this. This is a self-published book from a fellow booktuber / author tuber. So heads up front, little disclaimer that I know this person. We are not besties necessarily, but we're good friends. We've interacted over the years on social media, back and forth quite a bit. We've talked in private conversations like a handful of times or so. And that is Nika Marie. And the book is The Inevitability of, and it's the Gatekeepers Saga Book 1. I really love this cover. I think it's so fun. And it's like that buttery material that I quite enjoy. So I'll read the synopsis here. It's a contemporary fantasy, witchcraft vibes, paranormal, hoodoo, voodoo, etc. For centuries, a Hobbs witch has held Death's Gate. But for the first time in history, the next gatekeeper has no magic. Ricaria Hobbs is an overachieving realist who knows that her summer tradition of taking a couple months off from real life to spend them with her grandmother is on borrowed time. She decides this will be her last summer, but when she starts seeing spirits, hearing voices in her head, and is accosted by a demon, her plans turn to dust. After confirmation from her grandmother, magic becomes her reality, and her role as the next gatekeeper looms over her future. Rika has a lot of catching up to do, but with the help of a stunning stranger, her grandmother, and the voice in her head that continues to grow stronger, Rika wades into the secrets connecting her family to the politicking opportunists around them. Rika must decide if who she wants to be and who she needs to be can coexist. Family is everything, especially in this. So right up front, I will just say I had a pretty good time with this story overall, and I am going to continue with the series. I am curious to see where this is going. And I will just lay out a couple of bullet points of like my cons and then my pros that I had. So my cons were the pacing was a little bit slow for me overall. I personally just felt like we kind of took the long way getting certain places, I guess. And the world felt a bit nebulous is the best word I can think of. I didn't necessarily feel that I had a great picture of the world around our main character. It's our world, you know, it's not like, oh, it was all fantastical. But I wasn't feeling like I could picture things, I suppose. And then on a very personal level, just something with the character, the main character's continued lack of confidence and lack of self-assuredness was a personal pain point for me. It's not like I think she wasn't written well or developed well or anything like that. It was just particularly frustrating to me personally, especially in the first half, really in the first half. There were just things that like on a personal level, I'm just like, it does not compute in my brain to continue behaving this way. And it's like frustrating, you know? Again, not that I think the character was written poorly or anything like that. Just like a personality thing with the character that I was just like, I want to shake you. Oh my God. So those were the biggest, I guess, drawbacks for me personally. Pros, though, I can absolutely tell that Nika has a very, very solid foundation for like her writing ability. This felt overall polished and like a pretty solid debut, in my opinion. Also, dialogue, good dialogue. I am a stickler for dialogue. If you've been watching me for a while, you know this. I mean, bad dialogue, in my opinion, like what reads to me as corny, cringy, inauthentic, stilted dialogue it's probably one of the biggest reasons I DNF books. Like, because there's lots of things that I'm like, it's kind of annoying, but I'll push through. But if dialogue is bad, again, in my opinion, I just can't. At a certain point, I'm like, these dumb ass idiots, I can't listen to them talk anymore. So that is a huge thing for me, and I had zero of that happening while reading this. I felt like Nika had a really good grasp on writing dialogue that felt like real conversations. I also really enjoy the magic system here, this type of magic with the orishas and hoodoo and voodoo magic and practice of those things. I feel like it's pretty unique in the current adult fantasy landscape, and I really enjoy it. I really like that kind of magic being incorporated, so I really enjoyed that. Also, Nika knows how to write a villain or a dislikable character, because there were two separate characters in here that were kind of like either straight up villainous or just like, you're unlikable and like you're supposed to be. And oh man, I hated them. I hated them. The first one in particular, I wanted to jump through the book and punch a certain man in the face. I wanted to fight him in the streets. Actively, I was getting pissed. And again, you were supposed to. You were not supposed to like him. So she's very, very good at writing that. So yeah, I enjoyed it overall. I'm excited to continue on with the series. I gave this one 3.5 stars, which is my, like, better than middle of the road, like, solid, you know? And then also in July, I read my most anticipated, or one of my most anticipated new releases of the year. This was probably my most anticipated debut, or like new book, or first book in a series, new to me author, because like Esrahaddon, that's probably my most excited, but that's like book 3 of a series that I already love. So this was probably I was most excited for this, and I read it on ebook on the good old Kindle. I had a NetGalley e-arc, so thank you very much to NetGalley for sending this to me. Son of Blood and Ruin by Marielle Lares. And let me pull up the description first. So the overall like blurb here is, rumor has it on the streets of 16th century New Spain, Mexico, there's a new vigilante in town serving justice. This reimagining of Zorro, featuring a heroic warrior sorceress, weaves Mesoamerican mythology and Mexican history 2 decades after the Spanish conquest into a swashbuckling historical debut fantasy with magic, intrigue, treachery, and romance. So yeah, witchcraft is punishable by death, indigenous temples have been destroyed, and tales of mythical creatures that once roamed the land have become whispers in the night. And then we have Pantera, is our main character. Pantera uses her magic and legendary swordplay skills to fight the tyranny of Spanish rule. To all who know her, Leonora de las Casas, and this is a like Mesoamerican word, an Aztec word, Tlazotzin. I know I'm mispronouncing that. But Leonora never leaves the palace and is promised to the heir of the Spanish throne. The respectable, law-abiding Lady Leonora faints at the sight of blood and would rather be caught dead than meddle in court affairs. No one suspects that Leonora and Pantera are the same person. So that's the overall premise. I was just so jazzed for this. Number one, because for a while now I've been talking about, I love reading, all fantasy of all kinds, adult fantasy in particular. And it's only been in recent years, I feel, that the adult fantasy publishing market is really branching out into other realms, other cultures for fantasy versus like the Western European fantasy stuff, which I do still enjoy. I always say I'm not opposed to some like English vibes, castles and knights and things, but I do really like getting into some like Asian, Middle Eastern, African, South American, Latin American, but like South American and Latin American fantasy in like the adult fantasy market, I feel like is severely lacking, and I just like, I want more of it. Like there's such a rich bounty of various cultures and mythologies to pull from, and I know the books are out there, but as far as like in the US market and like the more super mainstream, there just hasn't been a crap ton. Starting to be more though, which I'm appreciating, and so I was excited for this for that reason. But also, the reimagining of Zorro, like, sign me all the way the fuck up. I love the Mask of Zorro movie from, the 90s or early 2000s? I don't remember when it came out. I think it was like 1998. But I freaking loved it. We had it on VHS. I watched it over and over again when I was a kid. Just obsessed. And just, yeah, the premise just sounded great. So I really loved the first like 40% or so of this book. I was hyped. I think I talked about it in a video. Like, I started this and I'm freaking loving it. It kind of turned into like a little bit of a gush about what I had read already from it. I was fully hooked. And then around like halfway through, it kind of started to get a little bit wonky with pacing. And like around the 60% mark for me personally, I feel like the plot and the pacing started to get really like muddled and kind of clunky, honestly. In particular, there's this one like mini quest that happens in the last like 60 or the last like 40% of the book, and the pacing there just felt really off to me. That whole thing just felt like random, and I was kind of like, why? What? Is this gonna come back? Like, why is this in the story? I don't know. It just felt like unnecessary, and also like this weird, like diverting from the story. I don't know. It was just kind of weird. It didn't vibe with me. However, I did thoroughly enjoy the mythology here and just this fantasy world that felt entirely unique to what I am used to seeing. And this book had a lot of, Spanish words, but also because this is happening not too long after Spanish conquest, there are still other languages being spoken here, and we have words from these languages, these Mesoamerican languages being popped in there, and it was really, really cool. They're very difficult to pronounce. These like Aztec words, like Mayan words, they're very difficult to pronounce for a native English speaker. It's just so different. The language is so different, and it was really cool though to have that incorporated throughout. I just really hope that the recent kind of slight uptick in these kinds of stories getting attention continues. I still ended up being very intrigued with the story, and I'm going to continue on with the series and pick up the second book because I think this author, once again, just has a really solid foundation here. I didn't love the characters, but I rarely am obsessed with characters. I liked them well enough, especially our main character. I felt overall toward all the characters just more positively than negatively, the ones that I was supposed to like I liked them, and I felt like it was interesting and complex, like their dynamics with each other, and Leonara's dynamics just in general with the world around her. And she is half Spanish and half, I cannot remember now the tribe name. I wrote it down somewhere in my notes and I don't have it now. But yeah, she's half and half, so she is kind of in this in-between place, as it said in the description, and I just thought it was very interesting how that all played out. Definitely content warnings for like xenophobia. Obviously, the Spaniards did not have a very high opinion of the indigenous people. Violence, there's like battle scenes and violence. And obviously just like an overall theme of colonization happening. So I ended up giving this 3.75 stars. I was leaning toward 4 still, but I think I landed on 3.75. Yeah, that's what I left it at. So I quite enjoyed it, didn't quite love it, but I had a pretty dang good time. And then next up, another one that I don't have a physical copy of yet. I did order a physical copy of this though, that I think is on its way to me. I think it shipped already. And that is The Hunters by David Wragg. David reached out to me to see if I would be interested in checking this book out. David knows Stephen Arion actually, and I have like worked with his PR team to talk about some of his stuff. The Judas Blossom that I have up here, I can't reach it, that came out this year, which I quite enjoyed. And so yeah, I was like, yeah, for sure I would enjoy it. So I got a copy from NetGalley actually. They sent me one of those, and I read that on my good old Kindle. I mostly read it on my phone actually, which kind of sucked because I was trading in my old Kindle for a new one, and I didn't have the new one yet. So for a while I was reading it on my stupid phone screen. But despite that, I still quite enjoyed this overall. The premise of this one, and sidebar, do we love this cover? I love this cover. I think it's so cool. The artwork is so cool. I cannot remember the name of the illustrator, but David did tell me, so I'll put it on the screen. But yeah, this is book 1 of a new series, and the synopsis here on Storygraph. She's on the run. They're out to kill. But what happens when you catch a hunter? Ree is a woman with a violent past, a past she thought she'd left behind. After years of wandering, she and her niece Giovanni have finally built a small life for themselves at the edge of the known world. But sometimes the past refuses to stay there, and Ree's is about to catch up with her. This time there will be blood, for the land is in turmoil and professional killers have arrived in their town looking for an older woman and child. setting off a desperate chase through deserts, mountains, and mines. Rhea will have to discover her former self if she is to keep them both alive. So in the first like 25%, this felt like it could very easily end up being a solid 4.5 star book for me. I really enjoyed the characters overall throughout the story. I was like fully bought in with the characters. Rhea and Giovanni are great. And the authorial voice. I quite enjoyed the authorial voice here. The dialogue for various characters was so funny and clever and witty and just like charming, you know? Aki and I think it's Anache or Anashi? I'm not sure. But the brother and sister duo, love that. And the world was really interesting, and we got like right into the action. We wasted no time, just like bam, here we go. But even with doing that, I still felt like I got to know the characters very well. You know what I mean? Like it wasn't like, oh bam, I don't even know them and here we are. It was like as it was all going on, I was getting a good picture of these characters, and I really enjoyed that. And I think in general the action, there's a lot of action here, and I felt like it worked really well throughout the story. The action was all 2 thumbs up for me. I will say around 60% or so, I was getting a little bit fatigued with the chasing. It was a lot of chasing. This whole story, it takes place over like a couple of days, and it's just like a big chase sequence. Again, the action I think was written well. I just personally was getting a little fatigued with the chase, I suppose. I still ended up having a really good time reading this though. It didn't make me feel like DNFing at all at any point. It wasn't like that degree of like, oh, I'm sick of this. It was just kind of like, I noticed it like, okay, I'm a little tired with the chasing, but I still just was like, I want to know what happens with these characters, and I really like them. They just really come alive. The characters really come alive, and I personally got really connected to them, as evidenced by me actually getting a little bit emotional towards the end with spoiler thing that happens that if you read it, you'll probably be like, I know exactly what you're talking about, because, oh my God, it was a moment. And the interpersonal relationships were explored really well too. The dynamic between the brother and sister, and then Rhea and Giovanni and their dynamic as well. And other characters too, side characters. There's a lot of side characters, but I felt like I got a good chance to know all of them as well as I should have, I suppose. Like I had a good picture of who these rando side characters were that we followed here and there. We were in multiple POVs and everything. And we have a very complicated dynamic between Rhea and Giovanni, the two like main characters. And I absolutely love Giovanni. I love Rhea also, but like Giovanni is just so spunky, smart, feisty little girl. I just adored her. And I've said very recently, I tend to be a more plot-driven reader. We all would like all of it, obviously. I love when I'm connected to characters. But I find that I don't have to love the characters if I love the plot. But when I enjoy characters this much, I don't need the plot to be my favorite. I just need to not actively dislike the plot. And that was the case here. I wasn't obsessed with all of the plot stuff happening, but it was fine, and it was fine enough. And I just loved these characters and wanted to know what was going to happen with them. It was interesting overall, and I just loved following the people we were following. And I am very excited to see where this story goes and where these characters go. I will definitely be also buying the second book and continuing on. And I want to go check out David's other work now as well. I ended up giving this 4 stars. Thank you again to the publisher for sending me the NetGalley e-arc. And to David for reaching out, and to Stephen for mentioning to David to reach out. Because I hadn't heard of this book at all. And yeah, it was a good time. I think more people should pick it up, give it a shot. And that is all. That's it. That's all I got for you today. I feel like I talked for a good long while. If you've read any of these, or interested in any of these, or weren't before but are now, let me know down below. Had a fair amount, basically all like more unknown, I think, books, or less mainstream popular being talked about. So things to go give a fair shot in my opinion. And as always, if you don't have anything to really add, but you want to say hi, leave a little emoji down below. And as always, thank you so much for your time. Hope you all have a wonderful day, and I will talk to you later. Bye-bye.